I'm a massive believer that players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's a massive one for me. And for me, real learning takes place once a kid knows you care about them. Unbelievable learning takes place once a parent knows that you care about their kid. That's where, for me, the holy grail of coach, parent, and players is absolutely vital.
Hello, and welcome to the Coachcraft podcast, where we explore the art of coaching youth sports through conversations with exceptional coaches. Through in-depth conversations with coaches at every level, from grassroots to professional, we uncover not only the philosophies and methods that shape how they develop players, but also what the journey of coaching means to them personally. Join us as we go beyond coaching cliches and conventional wisdom to reveal the specific practices and insights that make great coaches truly exceptional at their craft. In today's episode, I'm so excited to sit down with Neil Harris, who spent over 2 decades developing young players at the Manchester United Academy. Neil's approach centers on understanding that effective coaching happens both on the grass and off, building meaningful relationships with each individual player. Throughout our conversation, he shares how he helped shape hundreds of young athletes who went on to compete in World Cups and Champions League finals. Most importantly, he reveals why the best coaches understand that their role isn't about showcasing their own knowledge. It's about truly knowing and caring for each player as an individual. So whether you're coaching at the grassroots level or in an elite academy, Neil's insights will challenge how you think about your role as a coach. Welcome. All right. Well, Neil Harris, welcome to the Coachcraft podcast. It's a pleasure to have you here. And we've been chatting for a bit over the last few months, and glad to get the chance to finally sit down with you and have a conversation.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, let's get started. And actually, we'd just love to hear what you've been up to last few months. I know you left Manchester United, but just fill us in a bit. What have you been up to?
Yeah, it's been a busy period. So obviously once I left United, took a little bit of stock in terms of what I wanted to do, and sort of just decided to go into sort of the realms of self-employment, really. Very fortunate that a lot of people contacted me. A few clubs wanted me to go back in. I wasn't really wanted to jump on in after sort of 21 years. Just been doing my own thing. So I've been to America 3 times. I've been to Chicago, Tampa, and San Francisco last week. I've been to Malta doing some coaching. I've been to Romania. I delivered some coach education over in Romania for the Radical Football Group, which was really good, and how they're trying to change the, football and youth coaching in Romania and similar areas around there. And I went to Singapore, delivered some coach education over in Singapore for the Singapore FA, which was really, really good. That was with Mike Phelan. I've been busy. I'm a scout for, they were a first team club, but now a championship club recently. Sorry, Premier League club, but now a championship club. So I do some scouting, sort of 17 to 21s there on target players. But yeah, busy. I got a few coaching sort of different types of things that I do here in the UK, all along the lines of sort of coach education, player education, and parent education. Really, the holy trinity for football. Really, certainly in youth football.
Yeah, great. And I would love to get back to this maybe a little later in our conversation. You've put a lot of miles on recently, and you've kind of seen football across these different cultures. Must be really interesting. And yeah. I've got a lot of questions just about, what you're seeing in the US, but let's come back to that, because I want to talk a little bit more about your coaching journey and just, going back now 20 plus years before you're at Man United. Can you talk about your journey? I know it started around the grassroots and then into the academy at Man United, but would love to hear that story.
Yeah, so I played for Manchester United as a youth player. Then went on to Bolton Wanderers, Scunthorpe, and a couple of clubs. And as a lot of people, a combination of injuries plus probably not good enough to get to the highest level and things, and had some children young, and basically what happened was that my son's team was going to fold. They were only a small grassroots club at the time, so I said whilst I was out injured I would help them do some coaching and take the team so they wouldn't fold. And basically I was actually scouted by a United scout who was there watching the players. I think he just liked my mannerisms, the way I was just very relaxed on the touchline and having fun with the players, and obviously saw that maybe the connection that I had with them. So yeah, I think I trained with him once during the week, and then they had a game at the weekend. And then yeah, he just asked me would I like to come into Manchester United, have a conversation with Tony Whelan and Les Kershaw back then. But I didn't have any badges. That was literally me just helping out. You had to have the basic, I think it's level 1 now to do it. So they sort of said, oh, you need these badges to do it. So I went away and did them, just to cut a sort of long story boring, really. I did the B license, which was split into 2 parts back then, over the sort of the next 3 years, and then just phoned them up, really. I'd been in at Blackburn for a little bit. They'd asked me to go in and do some academy work there, but obviously United was on my doorstep. And yeah, so I just started off working with the sort of 7s and 8s, running a small centre up in Stockport here in Greater Manchester, and then also being at the famous Cliff on a Sunday, and that's where I first met into Rennie Muhlenstein. Obviously went on to be skill development coach, then first team assistant coach at Manchester United, and we very much sort of went down a curver route with Rennie at the time, and then obviously as football changed, as football's progressed, we changed a little bit, but yeah, and then ended up being there 21 years. So did pretty much every age group all the way through to sort of 16s. Worked with the Manners boys at the school, which is obviously the best boys. So from the last few years, Marcus Rashford, McTominay, Alanga, Mainu and things who would all be in that school. In the past, obviously, PK would be there, and Giuseppe Rossi and Pogba and things like that, Jesse Lingard. So that was good to obviously work there at the school as well. But yeah, so just worked through all the age groups, primarily sort of 13s to 14s was sort of my core group, 12s to 13s. Mm-hmm. But obviously we'd dip in with the older ages as and when. But I would say sort of my core years were around the 12s to 14s year, really.
I can't imagine this is a typical route into the Man United Academy, coming from the grassroots. So how do you kind of reflect back on that and also compare yourself to other coaches coming into the academy?
100%. So I think at the time I was certainly the youngest. Well, I was definitely the youngest coach at Manchester United at the time. Coming through, I was very lucky. I said this so many times, and I was very lucky to come into a group of people that was Les Kershaw, Jim Ryan, Paul McGuinness, and then later Brian McClair, Tony Whelan, just wonderful football people. But the most important thing, they knew football, but they knew children. And it was about children. It was about children's football, or about children, and then children's football from there, really. So very, very lucky to be scouted as a coach when obviously they were there just watching a player. And I look at my son now. My son's going down the same route. He's coaching in grassroots. He coaches in schools. He's just started work with Liverpool soccer schools. Was with me last week in America doing some coaching, and it's very tough. It's very, very tough to get into to an academy now, and obviously there's even more now with pre-academy, so the younger ages, emerging talent, which is sort of like a shadow squad, which a lot of academies are doing. There's lots more roles, but it's still very, very difficult to get in there. So yeah, 100%, very fortunate. Don't know what they saw in me, but yeah, they did, and like I say, I was just so very, very fortunate, to be around the people that I was when I came into the club.
Yeah, you talk about the people, and it's not the first time his name has come up in this podcast, Tony Whelan, and I know he was...
It won't be the last today either.
So I know he was a mentor of yours and just someone who was very involved in your development at Man United. If you can, talk a little bit about him. I mean, a lot of folks know who he is, but maybe just a quick background, and then kind of how he oriented around the youth game, because I think it's unique, and would love to hear more about that.
It is, and he sadly left Manchester United last year as well, after 34 years. So he was there as a player, one of the first black players at Manchester United, moved on to Manchester City, and then probably his most famous stint was out in America. So he played for Fort Lauderdale, and he's going to kill me here now. I can't believe I'm going to remember that. But anyway, I know he's based out of Atlanta as well, but I don't think whether it was for Atlanta as well. But he played out here, in the boom period of Cruyff and Beckenbauer and Pele.
Yeah. North American Soccer League, yeah.
North American Soccer League. I was talking to somebody last week in San Francisco about that, and I'll tell you another time a funny story about his Pele. Maybe you need to get him on, and he'll tell you about his Pele shirt. But he's got a Pele Cosmos shirt that he used to bring bring in and show the kids that famous green with the yellow cotton number 10 on the back and things.
Amazing.
And then Tony came back to the UK eventually. I think he then went to Rochdale, but had a bad break sort of back in them days, early 80s, I think it was. Probably now you'd be back in X amount of time, but it was a bit longer then. So then trained as a social worker. So I was then a social worker for quite a few years, and then did a little bit of coaching, I think, with Manchester City, again, sort of in the community stuff. And then it was Brian Kidd, who we obviously knew from United in the past. Brian Kidd had been out in America as well. Brian Kidd asked him, would he come in and start doing some coaching at the time with Paul and Brian Kidd and Nobby Stiles. So my coaches at Manchester United were Brian Kidd, who scored a goal on his 19th birthday in a European Cup final, Champions League football final for the younger listeners and viewers, and then Nobby Stiles, who played in the same game and also won the World Cup in '66. So again, I've been very lucky to have had two coaches like that, and then obviously mentors in the as a young coach myself. And then Tony's always been about the child first. It's all about the person first. You have to build those connections, and that was taught to myself and some other lucky coaches who we shared wonderful journeys for 20 odd years. It wasn't about the results. It wasn't about the techniques. Tactics and technical side of things. It was more about the connections and just some wonderful quotes he used to give us down the years. But it's not a race. It really wasn't a race, and we don't know how long these boys are going to be with us. So we've got to make sure that we try and give them as much as we possibly can, because we know the percentage rates on players getting into Manchester United first team, but also to Premier League football. We were very aware of that, but at the same time very lucky. The players that we were able to support and play for first team and then obviously go and play in World Cups and Champions Leagues and European Championships and things. And considering, we could only sign boys from an hour and a half away from Manchester, we're really, really proud of that. And we're very also humble that, the players did it, the kids did it with the parents and things, but we were just, we were very happy and lucky to play a little part of their journey along the way.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about the role of kind of the families and even the broader, community or network of people around a young player, right? Someone who's been identified as having some talent. Maybe Marcus Rashford's a good example of this. Like, what does it take? What are the ingredients that a child needs to have around him or her as they progress through this journey of academy football?
I say, they have to have a great support network. So if I think back to those players that I've listed and named there, they've had wonderful support networks, and that might still be that that's a one parent family. That might be that they have separated parents. It's just that I think that support network, that they trust the coaches. So to mention Marcus there, obviously Marcus lived with his mum and his brothers and his sister and things, and he just had a wonderful support network in that they championed him, but at the same time they were realistic and they trusted us. It's funny, somebody put a thing on LinkedIn today about a couple of players today who scored at the weekend and things, and their dads are actually their managers now. They both just signed for their dads in the lower leagues in the English game. Both scored at the weekend, and somebody asked me a question, and I said, the dads were absolutely different class. I've been very fortunate to work with Ryan Giggs' son, Nicky Butt's son, Rennie Moulin's son, Edwin van der Sar's son, Robbie Savage's son. Those parents were different class, considering what they'd done in the game themselves. They just, trusted us to get on with it, really. So a real good support network around them, whether it's siblings, whether it's parents, grandparents, and then also just that they know that it's a long journey, and just an appreciation that it's going to be hard work, and it's like I say, it is a marathon, not a sprint. But I would look back to most of those players, and if we were to list all the players that have got through and played to a really good level, or even just play for Manchester United, I would just say good kids, real good support network around them who trusted the process, really. And that's my worry now a little bit with regards to youth football, certainly in England, is that there's so many people involved now. You can have agents knocking on your door at such a young age, overexposure due to social media now. So people are knowing about you. People are wanting, to get you in a race. I saw something today, actually, very topical while we're doing it. Somebody put that England under-19s were playing Germany's under-19s today. And somebody who reports Manchester United in the local press here said, no Manchester United players, this is a concern. And then lots of people are coming on, and why is this? Why was this? We won the Youth Cup last year. We won the league last year. We but it's not about that. So you've got pressure there from a person in the press, in the English press, who's just put probably just a throwaway comment in there, and now you've got people worried about that all these players that get talked about and are either on MUTV or in social media. So everything's a race now, and I think we've also got to think about the age of parents now. So when I first joined Manchester United, I was younger than every single parent of a player I coached. When I left Manchester United, I was probably older than all the parents I was coaching. If you're coaching an 8-year-old now, those parents could be, 25, 26, potentially younger. And it's a different world. It's a different generation. They've grown up on social media. They've grown up on things. They've grown up to maybe, not necessarily entitlement. I don't mean that in a bad way, but that things can happen a little bit quicker. So I think it is tough now because of the overexposure of social media, because of the structure of academies, the EPPP and the Premier League now, and there's an MDT team now around it, and there's some amazing, wonderful people that work in an MDT team. But I work
what's that?
a multidisciplinary team.
MDT.
So for example, in a Cat 1 Academy now, you would have, so I gave this explanation to somebody recently. So in the old days, you would have maybe a player get dropped off by his parents or grandparents, and probably the first person and maybe only person he'd see was maybe the coach and the assistant coach, maybe a physio if they were injured, maybe an academy manager if they were there. Definitely a Tony, because Tony would be walking around with a cup of tea, asking them how school was, how the dog was, how the mum and dad were, and things like that. Now, potentially, Cat 1 Academy players will get transport in, so they'll be getting brought in by a driver associated towards the club, potentially. When they come in, they'll potentially be met by a match day coordinator, somebody on the desk. They might meet a sports scientist who may want to talk to them about their stats at the weekend or something that had happened. They may see a physio. They may see an education person. They maybe see somebody who's serving them the food in the evening. They may see a psychologist. They may see I think I said education, but there's so many different people around there before they even see the coach. So they could have been asked 8, 9 different questions the same way before they even see the coach. So I think it is difficult now, it's tough now because of the additional networks that are in place within an academy, by the way, who do wonderful jobs as a sum of, of all parts and things. But with that overexposure to social media as well, and possibly the pressures now that to be in a race, I think it is a lot tougher now, potentially, because of the additional demands.
Yeah. I mean, the resources being brought to bear for academy players. And I don't know, I mean, just the scenario you painted of this player meeting and having access to all these people, but like, what age are we talking about? When does that start?
I would say probably 12 upwards would be the majority of what I've just said there, really. Yeah, you sort of, what they class as the youth development phase.
But pretty young. And obviously with that, they're bringing these resources to bear. These are investments that these clubs are making in these players, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, this is maybe a whole, podcast episode unto itself, is just how these academies are professionalizing and then developing these players, but also, frankly, developing assets for the club, right? To move on to first teams, if not there, to sell them on to somewhere else. But again,
and what I would also add there is that, so when you get to 12 years old or 11 years old, you go to what we call secondary school here. So we have primary school up to 11. And then secondary school, you can still be 11 when you start till 16, and then you college and things like that. So these children will also have been at school all day, potentially have had access to 6 different teachers, maybe 5 different teachers if there's a double lesson, maybe a form tutor, a head teacher, a catering person. Now, all this is really good because you want children to be able to connect and deal with, having these relationships and from a social perspective and even psychological. But But for that child that really struggles with that, they've had schooling all day, maybe having to get on a bus or things like that, and then all of a sudden they're coming in and faced with this volume of people. Like I say, these volume of people that are all in the right place are doing it for the right reasons and are unbelievably outstanding at the job. But that's my worry, and I know a few other coaches that share my thoughts on this, that we are just bringing that professionalism down, in my opinion. A lot earlier, and in my opinion, too young.
Yeah, I mean, we're not in the U.S. here, not immune from some of these professional level expectations getting placed on very young players.
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember this player, Freddie Adu, here in the
Once,
U.S.
actually. I met him. He came over to Carrington. I think somebody was trying to get him in at United. When I can't remember how old he was. So I met him once, actually, when he was at Carrington.
Yeah, I mean, he was playing with DC United, doing commercials with Pele. I think he was 14 years old. 14 years old, right? And he was a great player, but he never got past a certain point. He dropped off the national team at a certain point. He bounced around from club to club, and it's sort of a tragic story. I mean, he was a generational talent. It was how it was getting talked about in the U.S. And I know it happens, all the time. I think we're probably taking our cues from the English press when it comes to building young players up. But I know there are some efforts to protect these players as well, because you are seeing. I mean, Max Dowman at Arsenal probably being the most recent example of just 15 years old. The clubs have a responsibility, I think, to protect these players. I don't know if you're seeing that, or if there's conversations, around that.
Yeah, but at the same time, like you said before, that they're an asset. And again, a Max Dowman 15 years ago, I tell this story a lot, so I apologise for people that have listened to me on 2 or 3 of these now. I remember Danny Welbeck making his debut for Manchester United, scoring on his debut, scored a great goal on his debut, going to play a team the next day, and the coach was coming up to us and saying, "Where have you got this one from? Where's this? Another one off the production line." But we always knew, but Danny Welbeck was a tremendous academy player, youth player. We had really high hopes for him. We've done really, really well, played up a little bit, and so we always knew he was a good player. But we knew that internally, and maybe England knew it. But England games weren't televised. There wasn't social media announcing England squads. You'd know within the club if your player was going away on international duty, but it wouldn't be this social media. Danny Welbeck now, because of the goals he scored in under 18s football or youth football, the fans had been clamouring for him to play. This kid came on and scored the goal. Similar with obviously Marcus scoring on his debut. So Marcus was added to the Europa League game versus Midtjylland very late on, and then Anthony Martial got injured in the warm-up. So Marcus started. Marcus had only played, I think, if I got this right, a couple of games for the 21s. He mostly played 18s football because he was so young and still trying to work out his position a little bit. Paul McGuinness had him up as a centre forward for the youth team. And he came on, scored 2 on his debut on the Thursday, then played at home against Arsenal on the Sunday, scored 2 again. And, and that was it, lift off. But I don't think there was that many people outside of Manchester United or Manchester, and maybe a little bit with England, who were that, aware of Marcus Rashford, really. I'm sure top agents, top scouts would have known on him, like we knew about Owen and Fowler and, Foden and things. But I don't think many people would have known about him because, again, there wasn't that much exposure to social media. So the problem is with Max Dowman is, maybe, I don't know what the parents are like. I don't know. I'm sure he's got an agent, but I'm pretty sure that Arsenal and, knowing Arsenal as a club and an institution as they are, potentially 10, 15 years ago, he wouldn't have had to have played a game. He wouldn't have had to have travelled with the first team, even though he was a, wonderful talent, because playing 18s football at 15 was probably a challenge enough. Playing in the Youth Cup, then 21s football, maybe having a loan. You go back to the David Beckham loan at Preston and things like Harry Kane, how many loans Harry Kane had before he made it, obviously stick with Tottenham, really. So, I just think that would Max Dowman be playing for Arsenal at 15, despite being a wonderful talent. I've seen him quite lots of times. I've watched him play for England when I've been out scouting. I watched him play for Arsenal versus United in the semi-final of the Youth Cup last year, and he was the best player on the pitch. He was outstanding. So people will know about him. But, would he have been playing 10, 15 years ago for Arsenal at 15? And particularly how good Arsenal are now really,
Yeah.
without maybe the clamours of social media, maybe parents thinking because agents are obviously feeding them information that they should be in and around the first team by now.
Yeah.
And also, it doesn't do us as coaches a favour. I spoke about this really recently that, a Dalman, a Saka, a Mainu, a Rio at Liverpool recently, these are outliers. So yes, they're big outliers. They're
Right.
they're
Right.
they're really sensational outliers, but they are outliers. So when you're working with youth players and things, we've got to, and with coaches and parents, we've got to really, really reaffirm that these are outliers. That is not a typical
Not
journey.
the norm. Yeah.
Not that is not the norm. Players can make it in 19, 20, 21, 22 still. But sadly, again, social media and how big the Premier League is that people think that, oh, okay, if I'm not in the squad at 17, 18 or 15 with Dalman, then I'm behind the curve.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is remarkable, but you're right. It's certainly the exception. And a career takes place over a long period of time. I mean, I do
Correct.
wonder, like, in 10 years, so Max Dowman's going to be 25, which is still, a young player by a lot of standards. And so, this,
Walcott was very similar to that, wasn't it? If you remember
yeah,
Theo Walcott when he burst on the scene, I think again Michael Owen, and they did have injury problems. They did have injury problems that they both
yeah,
retired early. Wayne Rooney retired.
yeah,
Early. If you look at the way, look at Van Dijk at 35, I think Salah's 33, Milner, whatever age he is now and things, and three of our real great English talents, and certainly with Rooney, probably one of the best English talents come through. And as Michael Owens spoke recently, he was unbelievable for 3-4 years, but again, really, really early developers in terms of playing professional football and playing men's football, and all retired quite early, really.
yeah,
Wonderful careers, but did retire, potentially early in terms of, the way the game's going now.
yeah. So, back to looking at kids, young teens, teenagers, and as they are on their own footballing journey, and you're coaching kids at this age group. I mean, you're working in academies, professional academies, and you're saying, these are exceptions, like these teenage players that are playing at the highest levels. But, these kids see it, right? To your point, social media, everyone's got access to the clips, the reels,
Yeah.
and they're seeing when these young players move into these big clubs. But how do you help kind of manage the psychological side with kids that this is still developmental, like your orientation? Yeah, Premier League's great to watch, it's great to aspire to, but the day-to-day reality of a young player, it's a different set of goals, it's a different environment. So how do you as a coach maybe incorporate the modern media landscape and the professional system with the youth development that you see on the field day in and day out?
Again, going back a number of years, but even as recent, I was still working last season. With honesty, so you've got to really outline that honesty with the players and the parents, in terms of where they're at. But I used to break it down very simply as, can you stay in the building? Can you get the next contract? So in England, it's 1-year contracts up to 12, then a 2-year contract, 12 to 14, 14 to 16, 16 to 18 when you become a scholar. So can you get the next contracts? That's really all you need to be worrying about as a parent, as a family, as a player. And then just, really stripping it down to, what are you really good at? What's your outstanding quality? How can we make you the best at that? Continue to make the best at that, and how can we, work on the areas that we need to, relative to your skill set, but also to, maybe the position that we think you're going to end up in, without obviously pigeonholing you too early. Obviously there's some players that you'll know are going to be a defender primarily, or potentially a winger, or wingers and fullbacks interchange sometimes, but a striker who loves scoring goals. So really sort of working on that skill set and position specific stuff as and when they get to those ages. For me, it's just setting short term goals. At Manchester United, for example, we used to have the pitches at Carrington where the furthest pitch away was the youngest age, and then every pitch, as you got closer and closer and closer, got you closer to the 16s, to the 18s, to the first team, and that used to be the aim. And Axel Twanzebe, who's plays for Burnley now, played for Manchester United, he did an article once on the Manchester United website and was talking about how Neil used to always say that, your objective is to get to there. Your objective is to, next year, you're going to play in the Med Cup. Next year, you're going to play in the Floodlit Cup. Then when you get to there, you play in the Youth Cup and things. So set reasonable, measurable things for them. Attainable things and really, exciting things that's still in the, that they can see that's tangible, really. Because I think if coaches and parents get carried away with what's next and always in a race, that's where the real problem comes. And I am seeing it a lot of time in academy football now that, I'm seeing certain teams, young teams, are playing on a 16s pitch or an 18s pitch. Some players are going really young to a certain tournament and things. And I get that. I get if they're a good enough player and best v best and, but there's ways to do that internally within the club. And for me is that once you're giving it them too early is actually when they arrive at that age group, and now it's the norm to be doing what they've just done 2 years prior. Well, what's ready for them? So I don't know Max Dowman. I don't know the family. I don't know, but if he's now with the first team, is he with the first team fully? Is he a first team player now? Is that it? Or he could play under 16s football. He could play in the Youth Cup for Arsenal this year. If Arsenal say we want a good crack at the Youth Cup this year, can you play in this? Or there's an under 19s tournament here, prestigious tournament. How is that going to be for him now? His parents, his agent, him to say, okay, I know you played in the Champions League last week. I know you played away at Anfield, Old Trafford the other day, but we want you to go and play here. So that's the problem. And that can happen at 13. If a 13-year-old goes away with under 15s or plays on the under 18s pitch, well, what have you still got left to give them? And for me, it's the same with tactical information. The best coaches are the coaches that know what comes next, but actually retain that information withhold that information, before it gets there, because that's the way that you keep them on the hook and keep them tuned in and hungry for it, really.
So Neil, one reason I was so excited to sit down and talk with you is how you orient your coaching around individual players. And a big part of that, you said the word a few times already, is trust and, building that trust. I think it goes without saying, the more trust you can build with the player, with the family or whoever it may be around him, the more meaningful and impactful you can be as a coach. If you can, though, take some tips for some coaches who are listening to this and how, we all know it's a good thing, get to know these kids as individuals, right? It's not just what's happening on the field, but also off the field. But help some coaches out here with some ideas for how do you do that? What does that look like in terms of, day to day on the field, how you communicate with them, how you talk about their own progression, right? These next levels and how you make that clear to them and kind of keep them motivated and kind of, it's like big kind of open-ended question for you, but I'm fascinated to hear how you think about communication and trust in relationships.
Yeah, 100%. So for me, you have to know about the child first. Forget about the footballer first. You have to understand the child first. What's his background? Is he a one-parent family? Is he separated? Does he spend half his week, at different parents' houses? Does he have siblings? Does he have a dog? Does he have, who brings him? Does his nana bring him? Does his granddad bring him? Who watches him? Just find out little things that you can, just by having conversations. And, for me, the best conversations and the best learning I ever did with a player wasn't on the grass. It was on coach journeys to games. It was walking out to the pitch for training or for games, walking afterwards or after a session, just pull them in to a coach's room or bring them in with another coach and just have a chat and things and just find out about, what have you done today? Find out, by the way, when do they have PE? So we call it PE. I'm not too sure what you call it in the States, but when do they have PE? So if we trained Tuesday, Thursday, and they have double PE and cross country and their school games are on the same nights we train, well, there might be a little bit of a drop off. So a coach that maybe is going, he looks tired all the time. He doesn't look, well, do you know that, actually this is his day that is heavy load day. So how can we work around that? Potentially can we have a conversation with school? Can we maybe get him in a different night or, until you find ways and means of understanding it. But for me, I'm a massive believer that players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's a massive one for me. And for me, real learning takes place once a kid knows you care about him. Unbelievable learning takes place once a parent knows that you care about their kid. That's where, for me, the holy grail of coach, parent, and players is absolutely vital, because that'll buy you time. That will buy you time that maybe when stuff isn't going certainly, too well for the player, and maybe dad or mum are getting a little bit frustrated, well, the kid can actually back the coach, and one who actually told me that I wouldn't be playing today because of this. Or the mum might say to the dad, well, yeah, but just leave it, because we know he's well, we know he's got his best interest at heart, because he'll come and tell us. And the big thing is, like, I see it a little bit now, and is how much do coaches actually want to speak to parents now. So I get the feeling that sometimes, parents are sort of kept at arm's length. You have to, particularly in the modern game of 2025, you have to include the parents along the journey. Understand and let them know that there's boundaries along the way, but make sure you bring them along the way. So I would do things that, car park, I'd maybe wait if I knew I needed to speak to a certain parent or player, whether it was a positive or a negative, potentially, kick up the backside, as we call it in Manchester. But I'd watch and I'd wait for them going out to the car, and I'd follow them out. I'd make it look like I was dropping something in my car or something, and I'd talk to them and just say, listen, he was brilliant tonight. Everything that we spoke about recently, absolutely fantastic. We asked him to play with one touch. He was brilliant. But you knew that. I've already told you that, haven't I, Johnny? And he'd go, yeah. And the dad's 10 feet tall. He can't get his head through the door because he's just so proud and things. And then all the discussion about is in the car is like, oh, that's brilliant, that. And he'll phone the mum from the car. Oh, you can't believe Neil's come out and spoke to her. At the same time, don't be afraid to, not confrontation, but to be honest with people, because that's how you get your trust and your relationships. And you might have said to the player, listen, you're messing about a little bit now, we need to focus on this, or, you're not really at it at the moment, you're better than that and things, and have a conversation with the player and stuff. And then maybe, depending on the parent and the player, and you've got to know, and again, why you got to know your players is that conversation might be, I'm really at it tonight again. It's probably up, I would say probably last week he's not been really at it, but we're working on it. We're working on things, and we've had a chat, haven't we, Johnny? Yeah, brilliant. And he knows what we're going to do. And if you want to understand a little bit, speak to Johnny. But if you want to grab me on Saturday, just pull me and we'll have 10 minutes about it. So you're not letting, a week turn into 2 weeks, into a month, and I call it kicking the can down the road, because it only escalates, it snowballs, and any problems, if you don't nip it in the bud early, they can escalate and things. So just having those honest conversations with the players, with the parents, making sure that if there are issues, making sure that the full MDT team, your coaching partner, is aware of it and things. That for me is where the real learning takes place, is just where that trust comes in, and you're empowering them. Then you're empowering them to make their own decisions in terms of not just on the pitch, but off the pitch. It might be a lifestyle change. It might be that they mess about in the change room before they come out, so they're not focused. And you might find something that focuses them a little bit more, and pair them up with somebody to do some isolated practice work and things like that. Who's somebody that they need to know what they need to work on. So for me, that's the skill and the art of a coach is understanding your player, understanding the background, understanding what's going on in their life. Our parents splitting up, is the dad one of those dads that literally for an hour and a half in the car is giving him information of what he's got to do tonight? On the way home, is he getting a debrief all the time? Well, okay, your debriefs are going to be a little bit better, a little bit different to that kid potentially. We might have some kids who parents don't even watch. So you need to give a little bit more to them. And then I would maybe give them a phone call and just say, listen, just to let you know, he's been fantastic this last couple of weeks. He's doing everything that we've asked. He's a great kid. He gets the gear in. He's really working hard. Or similar, he's been messing about a little bit recently. We've had a conversation and we've said it needs to stop really now. So if there's anything you can do, and then also that might be where you say, well, actually, me and dad are splitting up now, or his granddad's just passed away, or his little brother broke his arm last week and we've been at the hospital for 3 nights. Yeah. Unless you the person before the player, how are you going to coach them? How are you then able to do? You might be the best coach in the world, and I am definitely not the best coach in the world, 100%. But how are you going to be able to try and get what out of them on the grass, the stuff, if they don't trust you, if you don't know about them, if you don't know what's going on about them?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is the conversation that's so important in youth football. So much coach training. There's great training out there, right? Every federation has it. It's all on the grass, as you say. This whole other dimension of youth development, youth players, of what's happening, between their ears, what's in their heart, confidence and self-image, right? Being so in play for any human being, but particularly young kids, right? How do you think about keeping that confidence, high, or that self-image positive, so that they're ready for the next challenge? They want the next challenge, but also, not letting them get too far ahead of themselves, or kind of take that in the wrong direction. Like, there's a lot to manage there potentially, and how have you experienced this in your coaching?
I think also, you look at something like Mason Greenwood, who just an unbelievable talent. James Wilson, who sort of probably breezed through the academy years, and you have to try and put, we've called them speed bumps or turbulence in it because they're that good a player, that the game isn't creating enough turbulence and enough speed bumps, road bumps for them. So you might have to manufacture it yourself in terms of playing them up, taking them out of their comfort zone, put them in different environments. Not those two players, but in general, player A, player B. Or then you might have one that is constantly, whether it's a less physically developed player, a late developer, or even an early maturer. So I'm a big believer that, early maturers, yes, may look great on the eye from a scout's perspective, and what if you haven't got the right coach or the right club, will push them to the moon, but they lose an unbelievable stage of their life in terms of playing with their peers, but because they are 6'1" at 14, we've got to be playing them in the under 16s. I had this conversation with somebody in my last couple of years, and a big boy, I think he was a 14 at the time, and he said, we need to play him up, and I'm like, no, we don't at all, because he's a baby, socially, ecologically a baby. If we play him up, we'll kill him. Oh, but it's too easy for him. Well, okay, we'll find a way. Then we'll find a way internally, maybe training him up a little bit, or maybe one of the coaches will go up with him as he trains, but we'll take 2 or 3 other players up with him, so he's still got a peer group around him as he's going into there. But there's just that, I won't say lazy coaching and lazy thing, but just like, he's a big player, he's got to play up. Whereas actually he needs to probably play in and around smaller players to be able to manipulate. So we used to create a 5v5 program and take him tours to Belgium and Germany. Obviously big believers in the 5v5 program in the winter. And, those players may struggle then. So they might have had the big grass and they've been able to open the legs and run and do things, but maybe their technique has been to a detriment for that, because it's not been tight. Players have not been around them. They've been able to just swap players off. So actually put them in a 5v5. Can they deal with the ball under pressure now? Can they deal with it in smaller areas and things? So, that's where the coach education's got to be for me, is if you've got a late developer, how can we find the best with him? Maybe we play him down. Maybe we train him down. Maybe we pick certain games for him. Maybe we find a bespoke training program and games program for him, because we think he's a really, really long-term good player. He's got some good characteristics. And I did a documentary with Scott McTominay for MUTV, the club channel, not long ago before I finished, and that was all about growth and maturation, because Scott alongside Jesse Lingard would play down.
This is biobanding, right? The idea, yeah,
correct.
Yeah.
So
generally you like that. You agree with that idea.
100%. So for me, biobanding is at times is done as a token gesture, though. I think everybody believes in it, but I think there's only a couple of times in the calendar that it's done. For me, it needs to be a more prevalent thing, in terms of more regular, more flexibility in terms of a games program, in terms of a training program, and you've got to live it. You can't just say, okay, for a week of the year we're going to bioband and things like that, and then you've got to believe it, by the way. So if you've got Max Dowman, we keep picking Max Dowman just because he's the hot topic at the moment, but say Max is unbelievably technically gifted and has been playing up for the 18s, but this up to the 16s is the biobanding, and his biobanding actually has him down at 14 and a half. He's got to play there. Otherwise, you're just diluting it straight away. If you then say, yeah, but he's a good player, so we'll play him there, and we'll do. No, let them grow and things. And what I do see a lot of in the English game is see a lot of athletic players, real athletic players, and they're playing in 21s football or 18s football, and they might be 16, 17. And I watch them and I'm like, yeah, they are really, really athletically built. So the physical, maybe they've had a lot of tactics a lot early on, so they can play, they can understand the game and stuff. But technique wise, they've missed that gap of playing in their own age because they've been rushed and they're playing up. And then socially, can they now deal with it? Because the problem is if you're not going to put them in the first team, like Arsenal have, like Liverpool have with Rio, like United did with Mainu and others in the past, what are you going to do? So if they get to play for the 18s when they're 16 and get to play for the 21s when they're 17, well, you're going to have to play them in the first team soon, because otherwise they're going to be playing under 21s football for 4 years. I guarantee I guarantee that they're not going to want that because they've had everything so early. They might go on loan potentially, but that means they're still going to be playing men's football at a younger age. Why, unless we believe that they are going to play in the first team at a very early age and they are a Michael Owen, a Wayne Rooney, why are we rushing them? There are ways and means of within program to bespoke. Get a Bayern Munich over and say, bring your best players, buy a banding. Or bring your best players under 19s. We're going to put our best in. Do the same with Chelsea, with Arsenal, with Liverpool, with United, with City. Just find a way within your training program to do that. Because we used to do that at United. Those players that I mentioned come through to the first team. There's not many of them that made the debuts really, really, really young. 15, 16, 17. Probably 19, 20. Go back to your Fletchers and things like that. And stuff, they were still in and around it. So we found a way, because of parent education, the coaches were really experienced with dealing with that. And obviously had Sir Alex Ferguson, one of the best advocates for youth, young players ever. And yes, if you are good enough, you're old enough. But if we push them too early, and potentially we don't think they're going to be a top player, what's next for them if they're in the 21s at 17?
Yeah, so I've got one more sort of topic I'd like to touch on with you, and it relates to this, I think. And it's the environment around players and, everything from the city they are living in, the culture of the club, whatever it might be. And, return to some of these players that you've worked with, Scott McTominay, Marcus Rashford, guys who have moved on to other clubs. And there's been some positive change. Anthony's another one more recently. All these guys are from Man United. I don't know.
Anthony Elanga,
yeah, Elanga, right. And or Christian Pulisic at Chelsea. I think he was kind of treading water for years there, and then he moves to Italy, to AC Milan, and it seems his career has been revitalized. He's playing excellent football. Tomine at Napoli. Rashford's now at Barcelona. That surprised me when I first heard it, but I watched him play. I was like, interesting. Like, this is good for him, I think. So you see it a lot, right? A player changes clubs, and all of a sudden with that change comes a different, they seem to elevate, or they kind of get out of a rut maybe they got in. I don't know how you understand it, but what contributes to that?
I think sometimes if you're a local player coming through for your local club, so obviously Marcus was a Manchester boy, Cobby, obviously there was rumours of potentially him moving on late in the window.
Yeah, we were talking about him in our first conversation. He's a brilliant player, but he's not playing.
I think if you're a Manchester player, and Scott is, we class Scott a Mancunian. He Lancaster near the Lake District, but he's obviously grown up with the area. I think there's a clamour for those players that certainly, Manchester United, Liverpool, I think any club really, Everton, certainly Northwest clubs, particularly Northeast with Newcastle. You love having young players and academy players come through. I think the problem is from seeing football is that sometimes is that they then can become the scapegoat very quickly. So not necessarily on ability perspective, but if there is a drop off maybe in, and I'm not saying those players particularly, but if there's a drop off in perceived attitude or perceived work rate, it's then a case of, well, they're a Manchester lad, they're from Liverpool, how can they be like this? They should know what it means to play for the club and things. But also once you get into that professional environment, it's a job. It is a job, and that's another reason why us as youth coaches, we've got to protect these players and these children from it being a job too early, because I do think it's starting to become a job too early now. It's a job when you get to scholars 16 to 18, but it's not really a job, but it is because you are coming into the club every day and doing college work and things. but it's not a job. But when they're in the first team, I think we forget sometimes that, yes, it was a hobby that they became very, very good at. And we want to, as coaches, we want to instill this lifelong love of football. That's what's absolutely huge. But we've got to make sure that that we also recognise that this is now a job, with agents, with maybe with wives, with girlfriends, with partners who maybe want to live in a different part, who maybe are from a different part and things. And that's not to say that they shouldn't give everything for the club, but I think sometimes when maybe a player's been 2-3 years, there's a lot of pressure on that player, if they're a local player and they're not maybe performing as well as they've potentially done in the past, and maybe moving out of the area. If you can imagine, I imagine it a pop star. I don't think there's many pop stars or rock stars that stay living in the same house. So Paul McCartney and John Lennon didn't stay living in that house for long. There's a band from Manchester, Oasis. They didn't stay living in that house for very long. They very quickly moved away. Doesn't mean that they don't love Liverpool, don't love London, don't love Manchester, but it becomes too much. And I think potentially the goldfish bowl effect, and people know where they're from, who the friends are. Everybody's got an opinion. I play football with him. I went to school with him. I dated him, and I think potentially sometimes you're moving out to a different city, different environment where there's not as many, not hangers on, but there's people who know you growing up. It maybe releases a bit of that. That's my thought.
I mean, look at Trent Alexander-Arnold, right? Like, I was brutal. It's crazy to think that it was that fraught, him leaving the club, because I guess you understand that he's from there and the fans had this expectation, but my God, that was hard to watch. I really felt for him. And, but it's purely because he was from, he's from Liverpool. He's and grew up in the club.
I forgot about Trent, and I think the one comes from that is I think if the club can get money for them and they say, yeah, we're going to move on, I think with him potentially was the winning the title. So they're not, you look at the Gerrard one, how many times Gerrard could have moved on and he didn't, albeit close, I think. So I think that was their expectations of Trent. It was that, you were our next Steven Gerrard, who turned down all these overtures and things. And I think potentially leaving on a free and ducking interviews for a year.
Well, they still got the 10 million, right? Yeah. So I'm not gonna lean in too hard on this one because I want to keep my Liverpool fans as listeners. But yeah, you can see the pressure and like Rashford, like at a certain point, it's like, he doesn't seem to be enjoying playing the way he used to, right? And it's just on a human level, like to your point, like you want to build lifelong love of football. Even professionals playing at the highest level, you want to see them play with a smile on their face.
I know some players who are playing in the Championship, one in the Premier League I spoke to semi-recently, back end of last season. One person actually said to me, he's 25 and he's plays in the Championship, has played in the Premier League, and he said, I hate football. And I was like, mate, and he's like, take me back to the days of Carrington and the Cliff and stuff. He said, when it's just a job now, it's just an expectation. And I think at times the way the game's going, for me, it's a coach's game now. It's not a player's game.
Yeah, you worry about that. Yeah,
100%. We need to wrestle it back. Got to wrestle it back, and it's got to be a player's game and a fan's game, obviously, as well. But I think very much now it's a coach's game. There's very, very few times I'm off my feet. These days at any level. Even at academy level now, it's very, very prescribed. Game model, game methodology type stuff at a very young age. The problem is the managers aren't there long enough. So unless you are a Wenger, a Ferguson, an Arteta, a Klopp, Ferguson, obviously, it's who's gonna have the time to put a methodology in. And that's where we were very fortunate at United that we were entrusted to work on an individual program. It was about individuals, trying to get individuals into the first team. Trying to get individuals into professional football, and we were very proud of that. Our record with players into the first team, but also our record with with the players still playing the game and making a good living out of the game. And we were never told to do up to a certain point, up to recently, it's about methodology, and we want to build up this way, and we want to play this way. And ours was all about, we wanted to play fast, expansive football with width and height, and obviously, dominate games when we can, but get the ball forward quickly, but with quality. There wasn't ever we're going to build up here in a 2-3-1 and things like that. And I'm seeing it now. I'm seeing it under 13s, under 14s. I saw a game the other day, and I saw that the players had been given a presentation, or they'd had a presentation, and it'd been sent home, and one of the parents showed it me. And this was an under 14 game at the start of the season, so a couple of months ago, or a month ago. And so these players are 13 years old, and it had in possession tactics, out of possession tactics, set pieces for, set pieces against, and I felt like crying. I was just like, no, that's just for you as a coach. That's not for the players. You're not helping the players there. Individual tactics at this stage, not team tactics, individual tactics.
I think what you just said, I mean, again, we got a lot of grassroots coaches that listen to this podcast, and I think that's such an important point that you just made. I mean, you're making this point at the professional academies, right? But, I did a coach training last night, and that's one of the things we say. This is their game. It's not your game. You're a coach. You're a problem setter. You're not a problem solver. You're not going to architect, the game model or the formation for a group of U10s, right? Just let them play. Like at the end of the day, if you're just letting them play, letting them have an experience to learn how to solve problems out on the field, and you're just creating that environment for them, that's more than half the battle. Right there.
So I said on something recently. I said, and I was delivering some coach educations. I think there was about 90 grassroots coaches, academy coaches, a couple of first team coaches actually there when I did it. And I just said, if any time you are doing a session and the session is for you or for parents, I think I said the audience, and not for the kids, then get out, because you're just in the wrong game. If you're putting a session on for yourself or for the audience, then just get out, because if your session isn't dictated for the players and the age group specifically, so age group appropriate that you're working for, and it's something that is challenging with high support. So I'm a massive believer in high support, high challenged. That's how you can work with better players and also get other players up to levels that we want them to get them to. It's got to be just challenging, fun, progressive, making game decisions, but they're making the game decisions. If you're shouting shoot, pass, how are they gonna come up with their own game decisions? If you're gonna prescribe how they're gonna play out from the backs. Again, recently I had some things, and somebody said to me, we're going to work on this playing out from the back. Being the disruptor that I am, I said, no, I'm not going to do that because I don't believe in it. I said they don't need a set way of being able to build out from the back, but individually they all are going to know by a certain point in the season or whenever how to receive the ball to a back foot, how to step in, how to take with the outside of the foot, how to do a no-touch turn, how to get in a position to be able to play forward. So are you able to think forward, play forward, run forward? Am I able to play through, around and over? Okay, well, if I've had enough repetitions of that, both as an individual isolated practice, am I technically proficient enough to carry out this stuff? And do I understand when and where I should do it? I'm not telling them how they should play out from the back. If I'm playing 11v11, if my centre halves know how to receive the ball with the right weight, or if a centre half and a goalkeeper knows how to play the ball with the right weight, with the right technique, with the right message on the pass that allows them to take to the back foot and step through, brilliant. If he knows it's a little bit short, so I'm going to have to bounce back to my keeper, brilliant. Do you know the difference between a bounce and a set? The type of stuff they should be learning. Am I able to, if they're coming on tight for me, have I got the technical proficiency to clip a ball over? Have I got technical proficiency to whip a ball around on a one bounce so we can take out, at knee, ankle height? They're the things that we should be teaching them. If you are wasting your time, I'm not trying to be one of those old coaches who says that, but if you are if you've got an hour session or an hour and a half session and half an hour of that is trying to get children into a formation and a position to receive and tell him where you want him to play it, where you want somebody else to be stood, then you're killing him. Maximizing the full hour or hour and a half you should be having with those children in terms of developing them individually, and then you can work on pairs. So you work on them individually. Are you good enough to strike that ball with your laces? Are you good enough to strike that ball locking your ankle off 2 feet? two-touch work. Then you can work into a pair. So you have two centre halves working. You have maybe a fullback and a winger. But you can have certain drills that work on the technique side of things. But then your drill has got to progress into some form of decision making and some form of progressiveness. That okay, well, what now? And then I'm a massive believer of what ifs. So, okay, if that ball's gone there and that's now blocked because they've cut it there, well, what if now? I don't want to say to you, if they do block that off, I want us to play through here into here and we'll draw them in and stuff. I want you to individually know that, okay, if I've not been pressed, I can step through and break the lines with my touch. I can maybe play the ball whilst I've got good possession. Or if I'm being pressed, well, okay, I might need to step in and step in front of them. I might need to make a run off the back of them, or I get it and I bounce back into the keeper and then make a different position or run away. And the fullback knows, well, okay, well, I can come and get it then. So if you're not maximising your time talking about those type of things and delivering those type of sessions, then in my opinion, and it is only my opinion, and my experience is that you're not going to get the best use of those players and for that maximum time you've got them.
Well, Neil, it may be your opinion, but it's an opinion grounded in years and years of being on the pitch with these young players. So I appreciate your time. I feel like we could go another hour or two even. So I really appreciate your time. Before we wrap it up, I do want to ask you a few more questions, but these are going to be quick. Yep. I want your answers to be quick. This is my lightning round.
As you've noticed, I don't usually answer questions quick, so this might be a bit of a challenge.
This might be a challenge, so it's up to you. Don't worry. I'm not going to gong you off the stage or anything if you're still talking.
I'm sure your listeners and your viewers will want me gonged off.
All right. So a few questions for you. Here we go. Who is one of the most technically skilled young players that you've worked with, and what specifically was so impressive about?
I usually say Ravel Morrison, who people might have to Google, played for Manchester United first team, West Ham. I think he came over to Mexico, played at Chivas, and probably Mason Greenwood. And I would say for them, it was probably the ability to be able to go both ways, two-footed, pace, power, but just really clever in terms of the way that they pick up the ball. But I love ball carriers. I love people who pick up the ball and can go both ways, make late decisions. Again, definitely street footballers, mavericks. We'll call them. But obviously, been very fortunate to work with lots of players. But I would probably pick out those two from my time at the academy. There's a couple more young ones that maybe, if we revisited this in 18 months, 2 years, you might know their names. So possibly we might revisit that.
Well, that's why I said one of the best. I didn't want to hear just the best because I know you probably got many to pick from. But here I do want the best. What's the best piece of coaching advice you've ever gotten?
Probably person before player. Probably person before player. And, it's not a race, and both of those were off Tony Whelan.
Not surprised. What was your biggest coaching mistake, and what did you learn from it? And maybe there's multiple. Probably so pick one.
Yeah, I'd say probably trying to do everything. Yeah. So I actually feel my son's a young coach now. He's 24, and there's so much information available for coaches now. Podcasts like this. Analyst shows, social media sessions, one-to-one coaches, small group coaches. So probably there's so much information. I would probably say for me similar really is trying to read as many books and tactical books and then, cramming it down. But I would also say one of my biggest things, which I'm really trying to address now, is also writing my sessions down. So they're all in there and they're all in the heart. Like I say, I was in San Francisco last week, and you go to your playbook, you go to your ones and stuff, and then I think when I'm on the grass, a lot of stuff happens for me. I struggle to write sessions down. So if you ask me now to come up with a session, I'd have a basic outline. But I would probably say that I would struggle to write the sessions down. But then when I'm out on the grass, I'm definitely more I think it's a sort of audio-visual kinesthetic type coach in terms of stuff comes to me then. So I would probably say be better at evaluating and be better at getting your sessions down on paper following a session.
Fantastic.
But it's busy, I know.
All right. Who's a professional manager that you most admire or look to as a source of inspiration, and why?
I think the easy one would obviously be Sir Alex, given what he did as a man manager. I think Jurgen Klopp very, very similar as a man manager. I love Ancelotti. I think the way he's adapted his game from being a very strict, being under Arrigo Sacchi and his Milan teams and Juventus teams. And I think if you look at his Real Madrid teams, obviously he had some decent players in there, and his Paris teams.
It helps. That helps. Yeah.
It'll be interesting how he does at Brazil and things, but I do like the way he's evolved as well in terms of, it's the game. Let them do their things, and it's very subtle, the stuff he did. Whereas I think he spoke about that when he was obviously a very young coach within Italy, and it was very structured and a bit more prescribed, really. So I'd probably say Ancelotti of the latest coaches, but certainly Klopp. Mourinho. I loved Arrigo Sacchi's book. Read that recently as well.
I know it's your lightning round, but you said Ancelotti, and he's also one of my favorite managers, and exactly for the reasons that you said, coming out of a more structured tradition of Italian coaching. But something I was reading just a couple seasons ago when he was with Real Madrid, and it was during a game, and he was basically kind of letting the players or asking the players to help solve the problem on the field, or even what sub should we make here? And it was almost this very this dialogue with players that I found fascinating, which I think runs counter to how a lot of managers at that level operate.
I think you're very rare, and again, obviously he's worked at some fantastic clubs, but he very rarely loses his temper on the touchline, and I do think there's something for that, and I think just to bring that back into the youth game, and certainly the Premier League now, you see it that I was always very much a coach that, I wanted to, the game day was the players' reward day for their work that they put in during the week. And it was very much about, letting them, so you get caught up every now and again, of course you do, whether it's a referee, whether it's a coach, whether it's a decision, but, trying to let the players play on the pitch, let them make their own decisions. And I think for him to do that at the highest level, I think there was a game at City at the Etihad where I think they'd gone a couple of goals down. And I think, I think even the commentators were saying, is he going to make any changes? And, he seems very calm and things. And I think they drew it back to 2-2, and I think they won at the Bernabeu at the time.
That's the game, yeah.
That was the game, I think.
That was the game, yeah.
And Benzema scored like one. It was just you're just so calm and just let the players play. Again, it helps if you've got a Benzema, a Vinicius, and Mbappe, I'm sure. But yeah, I think people haven't read his book, definitely I would say read his book as well. That's an excellent book.
Yeah. Great. Last question for you. Who's going to win the Premier League this year?
I think probably between Liverpool and Arsenal. I think Liverpool have had a good start. I think Arsenal will be there or thereabouts. I think it'd be interesting how Isak plays with them, whether he moves to the left, whether Ekitike moves to the left. I think Wirtz is just starting to get warm. I think not getting Gay will be a disappointment to them, because I think that would have allowed them to rest the 35-year-old Virgil van Dijk at times. Obviously, they lost Kwanzaa, who I think is a good player, to Leverkusen. I don't think they really replaced him. Obviously, they've got the young Italian boy who's come in, who I know has been with the national team this week and things, and looks a big unit and looks a good player. But the Premier League is a different beast. So I'd say on paper, Arsenal look very, very strong. I think Liverpool might just nick it. City, you don't know. I think there are some not some issues there, but I think there's a bit of bedding in, and I'm not too sure over a couple of players that they've brought in. And just as it's popped up here, just said then, I think Marmoush got injured for Egypt, so I'm not too sure whether that's a bad one, because I think he's a good player as well. So I think a betting man would say certainly those three, but I think possibly Liverpool and Arsenal just have a little bit more than City this year.
Yeah. I mean, I think both. It's interesting because, I'm an Arsenal supporter, and this is, I feel, the first year where they've actually got really two players in each position, something Liverpool's had for a while, I think, something that, City's had for sure. It'll be interesting to see how all these teams manage the talent they have. They all spent big, they brought in a lot of players, and these are guys that want minutes, right? So how do they manage that? It's a long season. They're going to be competing in multiple tournaments. So, we'll see. But
I think going back to what you said there is, and what I was sort of maybe alluding to, and who am I? And I'm certainly not going to cast dispersions on Arteta. But I think if you look at the mannerisms between Arteta and Slot, as a player, as a professional footballer, an international player, who's worked every single session during the week, would I want to see my manager kicking every ball, racing up and down the touchline? appealing for everything, or would I want my manager to be a little bit calmer and sort of maybe look like they place a little bit of trust in me, like Klopp? And obviously, if you think back to Ferguson, Ferguson used to stay in the dugout for a long, long time. And back in the 90s, used to be up in the director's box watching the game, maybe for half of the game, and Mike Phelan or Brian Kidd or Steve McLaren would obviously do the maybe the touchline things. So did all right for him, and I don't think Wenger was a ranter and a raver, and maybe at the referee a couple of times, but I don't think he ranted and raved at his players. And I just think sometimes potentially there's a lot of pressure on Arsenal's players, maybe from the touchline as well, that may sometimes just stop that little bit of an edge maybe going on.
No,
but
I
I'm
agree.
not one to listen. He's working at the top level. Just my opinion.
Well, this has come up many times on this podcast. Is like the mannerisms of coaches on the touch line, and like at the youth game, we're always telling our coaches, "Hey, man, just relax over there. Like talk to your players on the bench, but you don't need to be involved like that." And I love Arsenal. I think Arteta is a wonderful manager, but yeah, I don't like that either. I don't think he needs to do that. I appreciate his passion. But is it helpful? I'm not going to say it is.
I can imagine he does a lot of work in training during the week, and he's very intense during that. And I think the players like him. I think the players play for him.
Yeah.
I don't think there's any reason why he can't be a little bit different on the touchline. And I think that may rub off a little bit to some of the players. And I think also with the fans as well. I think potentially gets the fans a little bit angst up, and at times when maybe actually you just think what a wonderful football team that they are, got some wonderful footballers, probably the best squad they've had since the the Overmars, Vieira, Bergkamp era. So just let them play, just let them just let them go and play the football that they know they're going to be able to play.
And it's these games are decided by the smallest of margins. I mean, this Liverpool Arsenal game was a perfect example, but maybe maybe it was that Liverpool players a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more feeling like, this is their game to win, and that made the difference. And, it was a piece of...
If you look at the Liverpool game 2-0 up at Newcastle away, Newcastle had a player sent off. You think you've got to see the game out. Obviously, they get it back to 2-2, and he brings on a 16-year-old at the time. What does that say to your players? And to him is like, 62,000 St. James's Park who were baying for blood, with obviously the Isak stuff and things. It was and he goes and puts the kid on from there. That for me as a player and a manager and a fan, you're thinking, wow. And I remember, but I don't think he was ranting and raving slot when they went to 2-0 to 2-2, and he put on, I think, Elliot and Rio. I'm only saying Rio because I can't pronounce his surname, but I think that's what he's got on the back of his shirt. But the trust that he placed in his players from that, how big that will be for him going forward. I don't think he's played since that Rio. But, when he's away with England this week on duty, I saw today. So, but that's given the player and also the players to think, well, the manager trusts it here. And also, if you're not playing well, you're getting hooked off. I think he took off a couple of experienced players. I think he took off Wirtz for Rio.
Yeah, I mean, he's been a little flat.
100 million player. So, I just think that trust that the manager gives there, going back to our trust and relationships thing, is absolutely huge.
Yeah, no, I think that brings it full circle. Absolutely. Just thinking about your role as a coach and how your players are seeing you and what you're projecting, your posture, your mannerisms on the touch line, on the training pitch, like all of that counts for a lot. Counts 100%. For a lot at every level of the game.
Every level. Grassroots all the way up to the first team.
100%. Neil, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm so glad we got to sit down and chat. Very grateful for your time. So thank you very much. And any parting words for our audience of coaches here listening? No, if you want to, I'm sure you put me on the socials, but if you want to follow me on the socials, I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram. I'm not a TikToker yet. I didn't have LinkedIn and Instagram when I was at United, but I've come off there now, and it's been a wonderful opportunity to connect with, obviously, my old players, my old parents, but with other coaches as well. And, being on here has obviously allowed me to connect and come abroad, like I say, Tampa, Chicago and San Francisco. And I'm sure there'll be many more visits to the States next year, as well as other parts of the world. And we're going to try to get you to Boston at some point. So that'd be nice. I've been to Boston. Right. I was there with Boston once for United. It was, I did enjoy it. All right. Well, hopefully we can make it happen. And just wonderful to chat. Thanks again for your time. Check out Neil. on social. A lot of great content for coaches that he's got. And yeah, enjoy the rest of your day, Neil. Appreciate your time.
Appreciate you having me on.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers. Well, that was just an incredible conversation with Neil Harris. And I think we touched on some fundamental truths about youth development that every coach really needs to hear. Getting insights from someone who spent over 2 decades at Manchester United's academy, working with players like Marcus Rashford, Scott McTominay, Kobe Mainu, it gives us a rare window into what really matters in player development. And a few key takeaways that I think will stick with me from our conversation. First, Neil's central philosophy that, quote, players don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. I just love that quote. This isn't just a nice saying, it's the foundation of everything that he does. His approach of genuinely getting to know each player as a person first, ask about their siblings, their pets, their family situations, who brings them to training. That's where the real coaching relationships begin. And those relationships are what allow for honest feedback and meaningful player development. Second, Neil has some concerns about how youth football is becoming over professionalized too early. And that really hit home for me. When Neil talks about 13-year-olds receiving tactical presentations with in possession tactics, out of possession tactics, set pieces for and against, you can hear the frustration in his voice. His point that if your session is for you or the parents watching rather than for the kids, then you should get out. I think that's a reality check every youth coach needs to hear. And a part of our conversation that I thought was so compelling were his insights about trust and honest communication. The way Neil would wait by the car park or catch parents for quick conversations, how he'd address issues head on rather than kicking the can down the road, as he said. These are practical strategies that any coach can use to build stronger relationships with players and with families. And the core message I'm taking away is that coaching youth players is fundamentally about human development first, football development second. Yes, you need to know your stuff technically, but if you don't understand and care about the young person in front of you, none of that technical knowledge matters. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time on Coachcraft.